Tao Meeting Archives, March 13th, 2016. Train Your Brain, Part 3, by Ed Monaghan.
I'd like to go ahead and just do the beginning ritual to get all of us started. 起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加多一点传世一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
Hello, everybody. Nice to say hello on a beautiful Sunday morning in California. I'm not at the company this week, so I'm at my home office. So hopefully my audio works. And sounded like we had a couple of bugs earlier. This is going to be a bit of a participation exercise because I'm finishing off the talk that I've given for the past 3 meetings. And it does require that you participate. So if you're at home or wherever you may be, I would suggest grabbing a notebook or a piece of paper and something that you can write with, because it's going to require that you follow the exercise if you would like to participate. I'm going to start off where we left off last week. And we left off talking about brain bilaterality. So essentially, the hemispheres of the brain and what they're responsible for. And again, what we talk about in martial arts and Qigong, and Tai Chi and the Tao is balance, being able to have yin-yang balance. And when we look at our brains, it's really a perfect example of that principle, so that we know that our left brain is responsible for linear analytical thought, the progressive, goal-oriented type of thinking, and then we have the right side of our brain that's responsible for creativity. So it's about experiential knowledge, inspiration, intuition, knowing oneself. And these two, when they combine effectively and our brains communicate effectively between the hemispheres, and sort of jump back and forth continuously throughout our days, the more effectively we are at creating that communication between the hemispheres really correlates to the degree to which we're effective in our lives. So harmony and balance is clearly an important part of that process. Now, to illustrate this, I'm sure you guys know someone or have known someone who is extraordinarily creative, someone who is just, man, they just can't stop coming up with ideas. I think in my observations of people who are that creative, that talented, they also, what seems to characterize their personalities is that they kind of have a hard time getting things done. They can be in the ideal realm all the time, but then the linear goal-oriented component of the thinking process tends to be a little less strong, and so they might have great ideas, but they just can't get stuff done because they can't put the pedal to the metal and actually take the action steps in order to be able to make their dreams come to reality. In contrast, people who are linear thinkers, those are kind of the math nerds, right? The people who want to stay within the boxes and are wonderful at this linear thought progression. Think of someone who is really in an accounting mindset, where they are fabulous at being able to set goals, reach markers, stay in linear progressions. But then, maybe have a super hard time coming up with creative ideas where they could enhance and embellish their life with creativity. If you ask them to do something creative like theater or music, and they're frightened of that whole prospect. So finding a balance reasonably between those two seems to be logical. So if we look at this and we correlate yin and yang to these different aspects of our brain, yin surely is the creative, artistic nature, the feeling part of our brain. And then yang is clearly the linear, logic-oriented, goal-oriented component to our brain. Now, one of the things that we do in our program at Ekata is that I sit down with everybody and I actually schedule with them all of their activities. One thing that I do is I ask every adult, are you doing something to fulfill the creative essence? Do you do something creative? And a lot of times when I'm met with it is kind of a blank stare back. Well, yeah, when I was a kid, I did flutophone, or when I was, when I was little, I used to color, something like that. So what we do is begin to explore how they can be creative, and this takes many shapes and forms. It can be painting, theater, dance, music, flower arranging, gardening. I mean, gosh, there are so many ways that you can do it. I have one lady who loves to collect rocks and create paintings and collages on the rocks. So, I mean, it's whatever calls to each individual. So we purposely schedule that as something that they do every single, at least weekly. For me, just like my meditation and my contemplative practice in different traditions, I do it every day in the morning and in the evening for my meditation. But what I also do is that every night when I come back home from work, I sit in my office and I play guitar for, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes maybe. And without thought, without any objective, I just have fun and create. I've been playing for a long time, so I just enjoy myself. And this has been deeply fulfilling for me, and it's been an outlet for me for pretty much my whole life. So that's just something that I do, and I like to do it every day rather than just on a weekly basis. Now, that's the creative right brain mode. So let's talk about now the goal-oriented, progressive, analytical left brain mode. And this is where this exercise can be very helpful, I've found for myself and for other people. So if you'll bear with me on this, just I'm going to kind of go through this super fast, so I'm going to do it at a reduced time frame as compared to what's actually written in the slides. So we'll just kind of do a sampling of it, and then you can take it off on your own if you find it appealing and do it for yourself. Now, this is an exercise that I use with my assistant instructors when they're going through our assistant instructor course. I got it from a gentleman named Dave Kovar, who's up in Sacramento. He's a wonderful, wonderful kind of teacher's teacher. And a lot of his training protocol I adopted and modified into my training protocol for our staff members. So I found this to be very effective. Take out a piece of paper, and we're going to spend 1 minute. I'm going to give you 60 seconds, and write down everything that you want to accomplish in your life. Now, you're probably not going to be able to do this in 60 seconds, but just whatever, it's brainstorming. So whatever comes to your mind in that 60 seconds, just regurgitate it, put it out on that sheet with no censoring. And nobody's going to look at this, and you're not going to tell it to anybody. It's only for you. So you just write down everything that you want to accomplish in your life, no matter how huge that dream is, no matter what of a pipe dream somebody says it is, or how small it is. Just write down what comes to your mind. Go. Time. Okay. Next, what you're going to do is you're going to assign a number to each of those items that you just wrote down. A 1 being a top priority item, a 5 being the lower priority item. Now you can have more than one 1. You can have a couple of 2s, a couple of 1s, 3 1s, 2 5s, whatever it is. You don't have to name them in sequence. Just sort it out and put the ones that are really the super important ones to you, put them as 1s, and then work your way down the list. So we'll take 30 seconds and do that. And go. Time. Now again, if you're running out of time with any of this stuff, don't worry about it. You can go back and do it another time. But this should give you enough to where we can move forward with the exercise. Now flip over your piece of paper. Or you can draw a line and make it kind of move this stuff down to the bottom. But write down all your number 1s. Okay, whatever your number 1s were, just write them down. We'll take about another 30 seconds to do that. Musical interlude. Done with the musical interlude. Okay, now take, it says 2 minutes here, take 30 seconds and then write down one step that you can take today to move you closer to that goal. Whatever goal is that you identified is the thing that you really want to get to. One step, no matter how small, that you can actually take today to get to that goal. Go. Musical interlude 2, done. Okay. So now, with this is kind of the next step. You've got a big list, or you will if you take a bunch of time with this, or a little bit of time, whatever it may be for you. And you'll have a lot of stuff that you want to accomplish if you brainstorm and you really write down everything that it is that you want to do in your life. And there can be some confusion associated with this. Even with your number 1s, you may have your number 1s, and then you begin to write down a progressive path toward achieving those goals. Now, what this is, it's a business plan. That's really what it comes down to. A business without a business plan is really doomed to failure because there's no path to follow. There's nothing to go back to and refer to, so that you tend to get lost. So we talk in the Tao about walking the middle road and about how to not be distracted by the side streets, the signs, and the shortcuts. There, the sign people that are standing there waving, "Take me, take me, take me. This is an easier way." So we tend to get distracted, and we'll shoot off in all these different directions instead of staying to the path. So this is kind of an example of that, where my experience has been, if you create a sequence that's well thought out, and you're not so rigid so as to not move and you can't adapt on the fly. But still, though, you have a clearly agreed upon and decided upon path. It helps you to be able to move toward whatever that goal may be. Now, as you do this, we have to identify the finite steps that are necessary to take in order to actually make progress, because our efforts can become diffused because we can get confused with too much stuff in front of us. So the objective here is to identify several steps that you can take, and for now, one that you can actually take today to move you closer to that goal. And then create a strategy moving forward. What can you actually accomplish in a day? And what can you actually sort out so that these number one goals eventually reach completion? And then all of this other peripheral information that we want to get to, we kind of have to move that over. If you look at the slide that I've got here, on the left side is the stuff that you can do now. On the right side, which is all that other stuff that you want to accomplish, you leave that to the universe, because your intention has been put out, your energy is there, but there's only so much you can actually do. So we concentrate our efforts on the things that are necessary to be able to move forward, and then let the pieces fall into place, and then watch for the signs. Am I moving in the right direction? Is there continual resistance in the direction that I'm going? If that's the case, maybe that's not the flow. Now, where sometimes I have to really meditate on this is when we know that growth comes through pain and through struggle, and this persistence and perseverance, we can kind of punch through that pain and that struggle to be able to reach our goals. So how you identify what is just the natural course of action with us breaking through, like Master William's story of the chrysalis, or how much of that is actually the natural flow of the Tao pushing through with the effort that's necessary for us to grow, and how much of it is actually going against the flow, like swimming against swimming upstream. Well, what I've learned is that a lot of that has to do with intuition. A lot of that has to do with stillness, meditation, and being able to try to take glimpses from the universe so that I know which way to go, because it's not always clear. And I'd certainly be interested to hear what Derek has to say about that as well. Now I'm going to finish up with a couple of stories. Excuse me. And this is more of a example from nature, which struck me as being very Tao-like. I read it in a I can't remember the name of the book. I can't recall right off the top of my head, but it struck me how Tao this story is. So what we look at is the water hyacinth. So it's a beautiful flower that grows atop the surface of the water, like the lotus. And an example of this would be, it's a very quickly reproducing plant. So if you have a pond that would be the size of, let's say, a swimming pool, because that's kind of a generic frame of reference that I think everybody can identify with. If you were to see a group of water hyacinths on this pool at the beginning of a month, let's say there's 2 or 3 of them, you would see just a small patch in the midst of the pool. When you came back the middle of the month, what you'd see would be basically the size of a raft that we would be hanging out drinking our tea in the swimming pool. So the water hyacinths would cover about that much space in the pool. If you were to come back on the 28th day of that month, what you would see is you would see the water hyacinths covering about 3/4 to 7/8 the size of the entire body of water. If you came back on the 31st day of that month, the entire surface of the water would be eclipsed. So what these things do is they multiply exponentially, just like cellular growth. And I think this is a wonderful example of how our intention and our energy can also provide a catalyst for growth. So that when we're moving in the right direction, we're exerting our effort in the way that we should, then it, the old proverbial, gets the ball rolling. It begins to gain momentum. Now that initial push, there's inertia that we have to overcome. So it takes a bunch of effort. But once we start moving forward and we're moving with the flow of the Tao, then it gets easier and the growth becomes exponential, so long as we're taking those small steps toward the path. And the last story is the story of the 2 frogs. And there are variations on this story, but here's my version. So there were 2 frogs out at a farmer's garden, and they were hopping along through the garden, and they saw a barn. There was a hole in the side of the barn, so they decided to hop in and see what was going on in the barn. So both of them hopped through the hole in the barn, and kerplop. All of a sudden, they land on the other side of the wall. They land into a pail of milk. They're swimming. And the milk is just to the point where they can't get out of the pail, but at the same time, their feet can't touch down. So now these frogs are really stuck. They're brothers, and they're swimming, and they're swimming, and they're swimming, and they're swimming. And finally, one brother says to the other brother frog, "I don't think I can go any further. I'm exhausted. How are we going to escape?" And the other frog says, "Don't give up, brother. Somebody's going to save us. Something's going to happen. We're going to get out of this. Keep swimming." So the 2 frogs keep on swimming. They keep 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 swimming. And then finally, the other frog says, "Brother, I'm exhausted. I can't take it. I'm going to give up." The other brother frog says, "Brother, don't give up. Don't give up." But the first frog says, "I'm sorry, brother. Goodbye." Drops to the bottom of the pail. Well, frog number 2, he's not going to give up. He keeps paddling his feet, paddling his feet, paddling his feet, paddling his feet, and he goes and goes and goes and goes and goes and goes, and just with the point where he's so exhausted that he can barely move any longer, he can barely move his little legs, all of a sudden, he starts to feel something underneath him. It's not the dead frog, by the way. He keeps pumping, and he feels something more solid and more solid and more solid. And the next thing you know, he's churned the milk so hard with his little feet that it's turned to butter. It becomes solid, and he takes step after step after step, boom, jumps out of the pail, back into the garden, and off he goes to resume his life. So obviously the story is a metaphor for our effort and how we just don't give up, because something will come of it. We may have to have a bit of faith and just continue on moving down the path, but eventually it will lead to, if not what we originally anticipated, that it will yield results. Our efforts will yield results. So, oh gosh, I need a higher resolution version of that photo. One of the things that's important that I like to remember about this, because I can get a little too serious about this whole process, is to be joyful. The whole point of this life experience here is supposed to be about having some fun. And I like this picture of live like someone left the gate open with this happy dog jumping around. That's a pretty good example of how I think we can enjoy our lives. And when we do that, in a sea of trouble, we see this continual levels of stress around us all the time, every single day. But we can be the little happy guy in the middle if we just adjust the way that we think about things. Our perception of our perceived reality is what creates our mind state. And that is really the thrust of everything that we do in the programs I've developed at Ekata. It's about our mental condition and how we do have control over that. We may not have control over external circumstances, but we have control over how we perceive those external circumstances. And that's what yields to the mind state of the little happy guy in the middle. So I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation today, and I'm looking forward to getting back to Derek.
Let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual. 起立，面向佛堂，持下三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持下各位点成11鞠躬，结班一鞠躬。
Join the Tao meeting live to participate in the questions and commentary. For more information, go to http://taoism.net/Tao/connect-online.